Good morning. Not that same old topic. I get complaints. We all sorted that out 10 years ago, didn't we? You know why I'm talking about complaints today? Because for the last 8 weeks, every Thursday at 8 o'clock, I've looked at that smug face of Anne Robinson, who's picking on these poor little innocent companies who don't get things wrong once, they get them wrong about 1,000,000 times. And the first thing they do is they invite the customer service director along, who sits there and says, well, you know, we get 15 million calls a year. You can't expect us to get them all right. So why are you making the same mistake more than once? That's the problem. And you may be getting it brilliantly right, but actually we're not doing too good a job on complaints even today. And the more that you put different hats on and become consumers, you're getting more angry. I'm getting more angry. All of us are basically saying, well, we're not doing the sort of job we should be doing. And yet, from the stuff that you saw from Joe earlier, and you'll see other things coming out, this is where the money is made, because the money is made from customer loyalty. I used to hear about 2 or 3 years ago, organizations say, oh, loyalty's dead. You don't hear Waitrose say that. You don't hear John Lewis say that, or First Direct, or Pret A Manger, or Richer Sounds. They don't say that, because it's just not true. It's the excuse that people make when their turnover of customers is too high. Loyalty is as powerful today as it ever was, and it's the most profitable thing that you can have. And don't rule yourself out just because you happen to be a public sector, because loyalty to you is incredibly important, whether it's your so-called customers or citizens, or even your own people. Loyalty of staff is the most important thing that you have to reduce turnover costs. Something like 25% of many people's wage bills in this day and age go on recruitment, training, induction, all of that stuff that you shouldn't have to have. I know some call centres that have got a turnover of 100%. I know some call centres that have got a turnover of 5%. Which ones do you think are the best to work in? Fairly obvious. That loyalty issue is incredibly important. So the first thing that we get is, so how is your customer service? And you know how many people answer, well, we don't get many complaints. You know, that would worry me. If I saw an organisation that said that, it would worry me because of this factor. One of the surest signs of bad or declining relationship with a customer is the lack of complaints, because you're not listening to them. John Lewis gets complaints. Of course they do. They just don't necessarily get the same complaint more than once or twice, because they listen. This is all from, by the way, a survey that we used to do pretty much every year in the ICS called the National Complaints Culture Survey, and some fantastic stuff came out of it. Staff recognition. So one of the companies that we surveyed is almost non-existent. A thank you now and again wouldn't go amiss. People aren't looking for money, they're looking for recognition. My organisation does not listen or respect any ideas of improving the service we provide. What a terrible thing to get up in the morning and go to work for that sort of organisation. For goodness sake. And this was from a customer service director. So what? It's worth bearing in mind that we only have to be as good as the competition, and there are barriers to client switching that make them loyal and dissatisfied. That was a utility, by the way. So why improve? That doesn't surprise you, did it, really? Here we go. So actually, we want to be as good as our competition. Imagine that blazoned across your mission statement when you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So what do we then do? Well, quite a lot of organizations just randomly handle it. And if you're really lucky, you get to be a little bit predictable, especially if you happen to listen to your staff rather than your customers. Then you start thinking, well, we could do this bit of wow, and then we could actually get some loyalty. And there are wow organizations out there. I've already named some of them. And interestingly enough, quite a lot of them are in this room. Virgin are here. People like that. Because, you know, I have done, I don't know now, 500, 600, 700 conferences in my career. I've never seen Ryanair there. I've never seen Currys. I've never seen the poorer organizations, but I see the great organizations all the time. Because they're the ones that A, always believe they can learn something new, and B, always have that wonderful conceit that I love that says, I don't mind if I tell everybody about how good I am, because by the time they've done it, I'll be miles ahead of them anyway. That was always Tesco's view. Tesco's view was, tell everybody what I do, because you'll never catch up. The Japanese had the same thing. I'll tell you a story about that if I've got the time. Anybody know who that is? I'll save you some time. That's Dame Ellen MacArthur. Now, that is a lady with no nerves, huh? Who in this room would like to go around the world in a boat built by B&Q? Okay, now you will say, well, at least those of you without a sense of humour will say, well, it wasn't built by them, was it? It was sponsored by them. Of course it was. But it's to build the brand, isn't it? Unfortunately, before you do something like that, you should think about whether you can actually get there. I'll read this one out to you. My congratulations to B&Q on getting a yacht to leave the UK on the 28th of November. You're ahead of me. So 27,354 miles around the world and arrived back 72 days later. Could you please let me know when my kitchen I ordered 96 days ago will arrive from your warehouse 13 miles away? Do you have to say anything else, really? Pity they didn't get that letter just before she set sail. Right, a bit more research from the Institute. Because people think, actually, this is all a bit hard, and they're wrong. Actually, the building, this was a survey that was done by Warwick University, Warwick Business School for us. The 4 characteristics of getting it right time and time again, service excellence, only needs these 4 things. And you'll have seen them in Joe's slides a little bit earlier. You have to go the extra mile. And a very intelligent man once said, in many cases, if you just go the extra inch, that can sometimes look like a mile to some people. So that's fine, especially men. 14%, they make it personal. You don't treat my 88-year-old mum like my 28-year-old son. My mum, 88 years old, do you know the number of times she's told, go look it up on the internet, on the telephone? That's obscene. That is obscene. Because people don't think about things and make them personal. Delivering the promise. But the bottom one is the point that I'm making today. 48% of all the mentions in the survey were how an organization handles complaints and queries brilliantly. And by the way, the interesting thing is the opposite. When you looked at the organizations, which were named and shamed in this piece of research, when you looked at the opposite for the bad companies, the ones that don't have service excellence, that number rose to 73%. So basically, if you're not getting the handling of queries and complaints right, you haven't got a hope of building a great customer service reputation, or for that matter, building the brand. So this is ex-TMI, but it doesn't matter. A complaint is a gift because it makes business sense. So why are we always running away from them? Let me give you some definitions, because it's quite important to start with. Complaints are quite specific things. A complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction, whether it's justified or not. In other words, perception is as important as reality. It is much easier to fix a complaint if it's a perception, because you tell the customer you fixed it and you don't have to do anything. If it's real, you actually got to do something. It's a complaint when it's directed at an organization or an individual who can do something about it. Otherwise, it's of no practical use to you as organizations. And you should always count suggestions as complaints, not drive them under. I know that some of the regularized organizations are all measured on how many complaints they've got and trying to bring them down. That is not the point if you want to run a great organization. You should be seeking them out and then dealing with them brilliantly. And this is why nearly all customers would recommend a company and their friends if the complaint was handled well. Actually, there is very strong proof, and I'll show you it in a minute, that if you handle a complaint well, customers think more of you than if they hadn't had to complain in the first place. Now, I'm not recommending you go out and deliberately bugger up somebody's life, but if you do, make sure that you handle it brilliantly and tell the customer that you've handled it brilliantly, because mostly they don't want compensation, they just want to know you're fixing it. 4 out of 5 customers would spread the word. They would be your marketing department or your dismarketing department, because we love to tell people when things go wrong. All right? We're not going to go down the pub next Sunday, just bought a new car, and say how crap the car is. But we will after a while if something goes wrong with it. So we can help sell your products, we can help promote your products, or we can destroy you. And as Joe was saying this morning, with social media, not only does it happen, Not only is it instant, but very often you don't even know it's happened till it's got out to several 100,000 people. And then suddenly someone finds it, which is the absolutely essential reason why tapping into social networks, being part of the social media is important. You mentioned this morning about some of the organizations that use their customers to develop things. Lego, great example. Most Lego products that are on the market today come from the customers, not from their research department or the development department, because they listen to the customers. The customers are fanatics, anoraks even in certain cases, but they will design products that people want. And so listening to them and working with the customer is absolutely essential. There are still not many customers who seem to be listening to the key customer service point. And so even if you haven't done it today, you're still ahead of the market, because very, very few organizations do this brilliantly. And even those that do get it done reasonably well don't do it at a high enough level. I know an organization, not too big, I accept, but big enough, several hundred people, where the MD sees every complaint and usually rings the customer. That's the personal service that gets organizations like that the right reputation in the marketplace. Despite the rise in complaints, only 1 in 4 employees even feels qualified to handle it. So we're not training them to get it right anyway. I see this time and time again. I was a judge for the European Call Center Awards for several years. And the one area that time and time again was happening was that we weren't actually either helping our employees to handle it properly or giving them the authority to do something about it. I'll give you a good example of a good case, because I tend to try to do the good cases. An insurance company. A lady telephoned in and said she needed a new form, a blank form, for an insurance claim because her daughter had crayoned all over the original form. These things happen. The next day in the post, the lady received not only the blank form from the little girl that worked in the call center, but a box of crayons and a coloring book for the kid. Now, how much does that cost? I don't know nowadays, but probably under £1. And yet, can you believe that woman is ever going to switch her insurance again? If the child was old enough, do you think the child would ever switch insurance? Because we tend to pass on to our children the same sort of people that we deal with. I also know organizations that would have fired the girl that put the coloring book and the crayons in the book, because that was not part of the process. But those are the people that are sad, and we shouldn't be working for them. Only 1 in 3 customer-facing staff are actually trained to deal with angry customers, and there's a lot of them about. Most customers would pay more for excellent service. Comes out time and time again. So the objective isn't to reduce complaints. Please go tell your managing directors and chief execs this. It is not to if you want to be a great company, you shouldn't be looking in the short term to be reducing complaints. The first thing you should do is know that you're getting them. You should have a marvelous listening program, whether it's on your website, whether it's by telephone or whatever. Field them all in. And by the way, also involve all the employees to get theirs in as well. Because the employees always know what's wrong with your company long before the customers do. So if you're not listening to them, and a lot of them will be your customers, then you're obviously not maximizing that. So you should know about everyone. Then you should be looking at the processes that make things consistent. We heard this morning, somebody shouted out the very first thing you want from somebody is consistency. Not bad consistency, but you want consistency. So those are the sorts of things that we should be looking forward to. And then learning from it so that it doesn't happen again. Once is fine, but after that it's a problem. Then maybe, certainly the specific complaint should go down, and then you can move on and welcome some more and go out and get some more. And that is the key issue to continuing development. This was the survey that I mentioned to you before, and I just want to pick some lessons out from it that we did for about 8 years, I think it was. And these were just some of the sort of sound bites that came out of it. 52% of customers complain most or all of the time. That figure, as Joe said, has gone up to nearly 75% now. 16% always complain. That's the key one. There are people out there who are constant complainers. Sometimes they're just moaners, but usually they are trying to do you the favor, even though I know it's very, very hard. I should just point out, by the way, why bother? I just won't use them again. That is the attitude of youth. Generation Y, and I would predict Generation Z, are all going to say, I can't be bothered. If you mess me about, I won't do it again. The generation that, as Nicola will tell you this afternoon, aren't going to email you anymore. They're just going to walk away. So that's the danger. We're not even going to hear those complaints in the future. And the more choice that you get on the high street, or particularly on the internet, you won't even know. So the differentiation is going to be big. It is very important to differentiate between customer service and the sort of thing Anne Robinson does. I'm on your side. The Institute of Customer Service, when I used to work for them, we used to always say, we are on your side. The customers can be horrible. They can be awful people, but they're still customers. And our job is to try to make sure, anyway, that they stay your customers and not somebody else's. I know there are difficult customers. This is us saying it now to a company. I know there's difficult customers out there, but I don't want to be treated like one. I don't want to be treated as if I'm the thief. I happen to be quite honest. Does your organization have things that go out when you lie to customers? Maybe you don't want to admit that. There's a certain insurance company out there. I won't mention it in case there's anybody in the room. But I use them because they're really, really good company. Good price. Oh, yes. And another one I shouldn't have said out loud. Anyway, they're a very good company. Let me put it ahead of the time. They are a very, very good company. And not only that, I changed because their prices were terrific, and they sent me, along with the insurance, a brochure that had coupons in it, vouchers in it, saying next time you reinsure your wife's car or whatever, you get 10% discount. I said, that's great. So I waited till my wife's car was up for renewal, went on the website, got the quote, then rang the number on the voucher and said, right, I've got your voucher here. This is the quote I've got off the website. I'd like my 10% off that for my wife's car. They said, you can't have it. I said, what do you mean you can't have it? They said, well, you should have rung the phone number first, and then we would have knocked the 10% off, which you get if you go through the website anyway, and then we'd have given you the number. I said, does it say that on the voucher? No. Does it say it on the website? No. And then the classic line. You know, we get a lot of complaints about that. I said, do you ever tell your marketing department? Oh, they wouldn't listen to us anyway. See, that just spoils what I could just be standing up here and saying everything else, because they are a good company and their prices are great, and I've had an accident and they handled it brilliantly and they did all the things right. And yet that's the story that I put in front of you. And it's not just a one-off. I don't do one-offs, but I hear other people with other organizations have the same problem. I believe everyone is on the compensation bandwagon. 55% or so in the survey that we did of senior people in organizations believe their customers are crooks. That's what the figures came out at. They believe the customer is always trying to rip them off and get compensation, which is not true. Overwhelmingly in all the surveys, customers will tell you time and time again, they just want the problem fixed. A, so it doesn't happen to me again, and preferably it doesn't happen to anybody else as well. And yet that's what organizations think of their customers. No wonder we're not really getting that bit right. Less than 50% of employees in organizations trust customers who complain to their organizations. Where's that attitude come from? The bosses. That's where it starts from. You don't want to be called untrustworthy, but it just sort of creeps out. Craps and creeps in again. If a mistake is made, in most cases, all people want is an apology. That's all they want. Sorry. How many people are petrified of saying sorry, particularly in the public sector, by the way, in case it means culpability? It doesn't. It just means, I'm sorry that sort of thing has happened to you. You can even then put in brackets, but it's not our fault. But you can at least be sorry. And if you're sorry, you can have a little bit of helpfulness that might help them solve the problem that they've got. That one might work again. I want companies to address the complaint. I don't just want a refund without acknowledging or fixing the actual problem. In the Telegraph about 3 years ago, there was a letter from a very leading airline where a family had written to this airline and said what a wonderful holiday they'd had, how fantastic the stewardesses were, how wonderful the service. Obviously, it was a while ago. But it just epitomized that bottom one there. Everything about the letter was great. And they received a letter back that said, "We're sorry you had problems with our airport. Here's a £50 voucher." Now, what does that tell you about the organisation? It tells me two things. First of all, they don't read the letters, but it also says we'd rather buy off a customer than fix a problem. Because that's what they do when there really is a complaint as well. Hardly the way to solve these issues and build a reputation. These were just some more figures from the Complaints Culture Survey. These were the best sectors and the worst sectors. Best sectors were retail, leisure, finance, communications. Government only 10%, and the worst, as you would imagine, the other way around. Utilities does not appear on the left. Now, you won't be able to read this slide, but I haven't put it up for that. What we also did, because they were genuinely named customers and named organizations, I just wanted you to see, because maybe you think it's all fairly similar, with a few companies just a little bit better. This just shows you the difference between the best and the worst. The blue, measuring up from naught towards world class, the blue rods in all of the ways that you could measure this particular organization, which I'm delighted to tell you was a brewery, and my local brewery too, pretty much world class across the board. Now, see, men would just call that green because we only know 6 colours, but women would have a different word for it because you know 50, and I've no idea what things like azure are or whatever, so that's green to me. Or orange, or something like that. But you can see where they come. The difference is incredible. And in fact, in quite a lot of the categories, they were even below the line. They didn't even get to naught. So there is a massive difference between good companies and bad companies. Love this one. You will not believe this. I'll read this one out to you. 92% of directors responding to the survey say the complaints culture affects the reputation of their company. First of all, I'd like to know who the moronic 8% are that didn't think that. But anyway, they said it. And 92% believe it's important to align their brand promises with the values and behaviours of employees that deliver the customer service experience. Of course you do. But only 1/3 of the employees we asked believe their organisations are willing to change to get to those sorts of levels. And employees in the best performing organisations believe their employers are listening to them and making improvements as a result. Bit of a disconnect there between the boardroom and whatever. So managing complaints well is not that difficult. It has to be a friendly culture. It has to be customer focused. Procedures as well as systems. There are some very good systems out there that can help. They can't solve, but they can help as long as they're well supported by the right attitude. Lots of learning and innovation, because it's from those things, particularly in high-tech situations, where you can actually develop new product, and role modeling from within. You see, if the bosses say they believe in all this stuff, and then all they do is look at the short-term figures and the profitability or whatever, the big problem, as Tom Peters used to say, is employees do listen to what you say, not they don't listen to what you say. And so much as you might say and pretend that you believe all this stuff, if your actions then show that you don't actually support all this stuff, employees are not going to bother. You've got to lead, not push. So, let's go for a step now. Let's put the answers back. Developing a service promise. Declaring, delivering it extensively, internally and externally. And, by the way, adding the fact that this is not a 3-month project. This is a long-term investment to get these things right, and it can be lost. Then, I think Joe mentioned this as well. Customers need to be treated as partners. And I do mean employees as well as customers. Again, the example, I don't want to overdo it, but there can't be a total coincidence about the John Lewis and the Waitrose model in terms of involving employees and customers. Processes and systems must be designed with the customer in mind. Customer-centric, not the other way around, not the way that many organizations are, process-centric or self-centric, in the fact that, well, this is what we want to know, rather than anything else. The questions that we ask our customers, these crazy things that are in many hotel rooms that ask what the room is like and what all these things are like, it's all hygienic. It's all, we want to know whether they cleaned it. Yeah, they cleaned it, but the bed was uncomfortable. Don't ask that. Yes, the electricity's worked, but the room was so small, I couldn't breathe. They don't ask that. I went through a survey at Stansted Airport about 6 months ago about the security thing, and I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs of that because If people like O'Leary can get it wrong, how would I stand up in such company? But it was all about the process, right? It was all about, did we do this and did we do that? And the 9 questions out of the 10 that they asked me, I rated them 8, 9, something like that. And the last question was, and how did you rate the overall process? And I said, 0. They said, well, how can you rate that 0 if you rated all the others 9? I said, because all of those are hygienic. Those are tick box exercises. Yes, you did all those things, but it was still horrible. It was still an awful experience. You haven't proven to me that there was a benefit in doing it, and it seemed totally random, and you didn't really know what you were doing. And that's the difference between looking at the things that matter within the process and looking at the system as to whether it's working all right. Totally different areas of both expertise, responsibility, and implementation needed. Managers and staff train and then coach their service providers. I put that in deliberately for one very big reason. Too many times that responsibility is delegated to HR. I've got a lot of time for HR. I like going down the pub with them, but they are not responsible for your results. You are. And so personal involvement, and I would add to that, recruitment as well, and all of those things is your responsibility. It's bad enough letting some other organization run your customers. But letting HR do it is just plain crazy. They're your customers and your employees' customers. And so therefore owning them is incredibly, incredibly important because you're the only people that will benefit from learning from them. Reward and recognition needs to be aligned to customer service, not to financial performance. Because if you believe all this stuff, and quite a lot of the senior people in good organizations certainly do, and don't need it proven, they know that if you measure it on customer service, the profitability is going to come anyway. But measuring it on customer service can show you the future, not the past. And then all of the measurements that go with it are incredibly important to prove it partly to the naysayers and the deniers, but measuring the right things, not the wrong things. Not just because you can measure it, but measuring the right things. Let me just mention the UK CSI. Joe mentioned it earlier on, and this was put in about 3 or 4 years ago when I was still at the ICS. And I'm not going to go through the UK CSI at all, but what I've been trying to do is pick out bits that show you how important complaints are from many different directions, and this is another one. These are all the sorts of questions that get asked, and you can ignore them in many respects, because this is how we build a CSI in terms of what did they look like and all of that sort of stuff. But look at this. These are the 2 things that we're talking about. In general, most organizations get in the 6s and 7s in every area except one. Complaints. Outcome of complaints and handling complaints consistently and right from the start of the survey and to today is always rated lowest by customers. Now, they can't all be wrong. So let's please try and listen to this stuff and realize that even when we think we're doing it right, maybe we're not. Maybe we're not quite doing that little bit of extra on complaints. And this was the comparison. This is the fantastically interesting comparison of comparing the importance and the performance with actually handling them. Let's see how low that is. And in fact, in automotive, it went to 0. That's improved quite significantly because they listened. This was the loyalty effect I mentioned to you earlier. This is a loyalty index of, this is about how loyal most people are, at 65%. If they've had no problems with an organization, it can rise to 70%. If they've had a complaint and they're then dissatisfied, it drops down to 34%. But if you've fixed it and you've handled it brilliantly, it's actually even higher. Did that jump? It's even higher at 72. It's even higher than if they didn't have a complaint in the first place. So what do customers actually say? Because sometimes people are too nervous or not quite ready. And they say, well, I didn't know how to do it, really. Didn't know if I should complain. Didn't have the time. You won't care about it anyway, even if I do. And I don't know the process. Well, there are 2 areas. There's strategic and there's operational. In the strategic sense, I recommend you these. If you'd like copies of the slides, just drop me a business card when I'm down at lunch or something, and I'll email them to you. Have a clear, flexible, welcoming, consistent, and open policy. All of those words are really important. Clear, flexible, welcoming, consistent, and open. Train staff and management, especially management, in complaints handling. Give it enough priority and authority. It's an important thing. And log it and keep reading it and learning from it. Ensure you can process from all sources, however they come in, phone call, email, text, whatever it is, and then the analysis and sharing. And then these are the actual actions. The two phrases of thank you and I'm sorry are so underutilized, it's criminal. Try to put yourself in the customer's place. Customers can have a valid point. Sometimes they actually do. So just denial is not actually one of the answers. Get all the facts first. That's the listening thing. You want everything so you know everything is led up to it. Try and avoid the free gift route, if you can. There is a place for it, but it's not very big. Correct and then learn, minimizing potential to repeat. Always respond. Something like 70% of all complaints are never answered or responded to. That's criminal. Try it yourself. Have a couple of complaints, see what happens. Just see how long you're waiting there. Listen to and learn from staff and lead by example. So what gets in the way, just to pull this thing together? Well, you do, really, if you're reasonably senior in an organization. It's not given enough priority or time. Middle management are not great coaches. They weren't trained to be great coaches. They were trained to improve their own careers primarily. But that's not even a joke. It is. It's what they do. Middle management's job is to develop through the organization to become senior management. And if we don't train them as coaches, or we don't help them to be coaches, then it's not likely that it's going to happen. There's the cost control versus investment in the future clash. There's a fear culture in some companies. I worked for bosses who everyone was totally petrified of. Suits, closed doors, segregation policies, status, all of that stuff gets in the way. Forms and procedures, petty rules. And just hiring the wrong people. We need altruists, particularly in customer service. We need people that actually care about this stuff. And then we don't treat them right and we don't develop skills. Scary. And I'd like you to tell your customers, you'll get a lot better answer if you don't lose your temper. Now, this can go on your website. This is the way to complain to us, to get the most out of a complaint. Be clear what you want, give us a chance to sort it out. This is the route to the top if it's really serious. Choose the right medium and don't be fobbed off. How many people have even got that sort of thing on their website to show that they actually want to listen? So to bring it all together in the one sentence, make it easier for people to complain and welcome it and learn from it. I put this one up because I knew Jonty would make some sort of joke. This is actually my current philosophy. My wife said, what you doing today? I said, nothing. She said, you did that yesterday. I said, I wasn't finished. That's what I do other than when I come up on stages like this. I love this. It's my 6th year. Thank you, Richard, for asking me along. Thank you for your attention, and thank you.